Senator Reed, Senator Chambliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And gentlemen, you have previously served our country well in your respective capacities, and we appreciate you coming back once again to help us deal with an issue that obviously is extremely important, at the same time extremely sensitive. So thank you for your continuing service. In your report, you suggest that the Pentagon coordinate with the FBI Behavioral Science Unit, military violence unit, to identify the indicators specific to DOD personnel. And the DOD should use these indicators to develop an assessment tool for commanders, supervisors, and professional support service personnel to determine when individuals present risk for violent behavior. Now, my question is, don't those tools already exist in the form of the Army Form 4856, which is Army Developmental Counseling Form, and the Army Form 67-9, which is the Army Officer Evaluation Report? And assuming these documents are used and filled out appropriately, shouldn't we be able to identify a soldier who may be becoming self-radicalized, as we think happened here, and appropriately address the threat that they represent?
I'm going to let Admiral Clark have a good long swing at that because of his extensive experience with OERs and the like, but let me say what we were trying to do here, Senator. The fact is that there is a very good argument that there are tools out there that commanders can use to make the assessments they need to make. The question for us, though, is, are there ways to strengthen what they can do? And have we learned anything by the incident we faced, and we'll discuss with you in closed session from this incident about how we can shore that up? And one thing is that, frankly, things like officer efficiency reports, there is a culture in the services, all of them, which I think Admiral Clark can speak to better than I can, that doesn't always find and report the kinds of things that would be better to report. For one reason, it may be because the information of some offense of previous drug usage, but there has been a rehabilitation effort, or of some other contacts or signs, may have been left to the discretion of a commander as to whether to even keep that in the record so that it would be recorded in the OER. It never gets to the next commander, the next supervisor. And suddenly earlier signs are lost in the midst of the past and as they move forward. We need to shore that up. We said to the Secretary in our executive summary, in our 5 or 6 big recommendations, you need to say to the officer corps of the nation in all the services that what you report on these OERs and on things like the SAE, Service School Academic Evaluation Report, which takes the place of the OER when they're in service school, you need to say that that matters and that it has to be accurate and, most of all, complete so that we can make the judgments we need to make. Now, that's the thrust of what we're doing here. So, yes, reports exist, but they're not being made use of in a way that fits what we need in these new and trying times.
So do you think it's a matter of further education of those supervisors that are making the, or asking the questions and making that report?
I have an answer to that. It's a following question to me, but I want to get Admiral Clark involved. My answer is education, yes, but also making sure that that the standards we ask, and maybe that is education, are applied. But there are also some recommendations for some further adjustments.
Okay, Admiral Clark.
I don't know the first form that you referenced. I have the second forms here in front of me, so I can talk specifically to them.
Well, the 4856 is the Army Developmental Counseling Form, which I understand is completed once a year. The 67-9 is a quarterly report for enlisted and officer personnel.
Okay, I don't have that in front of me, but I would say that that form and the tools that go with that would be great if the person knows what the indicators are. And our review suggests that in the area of self-radicalization, that can be very fuzzy. And so and the reason we suggested the FBI is they've already started doing some work here. So we're saying to the Secretary, don't start from scratch. but also the recommendation to use every expert that we know how to get in the because we're looking for behavioral cues, and these are their subtleties. And once those are known, I have every confidence that our leadership, our supervisors, will know how to deal with that. My interpretation of that was we were talking about an education, and that's why you got to have an outreach program that gets the training to the right people so they have understanding of these issues.
Yeah. If I'm hearing you right with regard to what both of you said in your statement and your answers to your questions thus far, we did a great job responding at Fort Hood. Our men and women were courageous, heroic, and did a good job. But with the events leading up to the incident, we got some major deficiencies. In fact, Admiral, you alluded to this, I think you call it an evolving threat, or your exact words that you said earlier. Are there any protections or preventative measures that are in place to detect, for example, an individual who is one of those folks that I would categorize as an evolving threat, who might simply join a branch of the military with the intention of duplicating what happened at Fort Hood? What have we got in place now, or what do we need to do to ensure that we don't have somebody who spent the last 6 months in Yemen, or 4 years ago spent 6 months in Yemen with the idea of ultimately coming back and having been trained to go in and duplicate this event?
Or who even spent a bunch of years or months out in the wilds of our country becoming radicalized in a different way and under different pressures. The question is the same. You're right, Senator. There was no failing by those at Fort Hood in their response. If there were gaps, it was in us as we tried to prepare ourselves to identify those factors that would say, this person is going to be a problem. We need to act. But I think your question was to the Admiral.
And I agree completely with what Secretary West has said. And now we're talking, the thrust of your question gets us to this issue of the identification question that I raised as point 2. And that identification question raises things about the manner in which we do checks and what's involved there. And I think it would be smart not to inform an enemy in a public way about my particular impressions, and if it's all right with you,
sure,
that we talk about that in a closed session. But affirming your comment, this is part of the challenge. And by the way, should we not expect that they're going to use every technique and scheme maneuver that they can figure out?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we got to, number one, get the information, but further to your point you stated earlier, Admiral, is we got to share that information. It's got to get in the hands of the people who are filling out those forms or who are making recommendations relative to an individual. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And, Mr. Chairman, can I say, since you made that last point, I say one more time, get rid of the barriers inside and outside of the department, the barriers to information flow. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I make, I'm sorry to keep this going, but could I add one more thought to that?
Sure.
Here's another problem that your questions and Admiral Clark's response raised, Senator, and that is this. Let's take religion. The reason we have numbers and records on the representation of people of various religions in our forces is because they self-identify. They say, this is my religion, or I'm an Episcopalian, or what have you. What about those who, formulating a reason to hide their purposes, don't disclose their religion? Don't disclose anything that would cause us to try to, this is not your term, to try to profile. It's the indicators, the behavioral cues that we have to rely on. They are our only way of getting at this in any organized and aggressive and effective way.
And one more comment then, so that you know, the alleged perpetrator was initially in the Army as an enlisted person, and he went off and went to school. When he came into Army the first time, he professed to to be a member of the Islamic faith. And when he came in as an officer, he did not declare. So all of the indicators aren't right in front of our nose, but I've got all the statistics here to talk about every brand of religion that we know about. The reality is that way over half of our people never ever declare what they choose not to declare.
Yeah.
And so it's not always immediately apparent, and that's why this is a challenge. But we're really focusing on the behaviors and that's what we wanted to put the spotlight on. The department, in its guidance and instruction to the commanders and all the people in the field, are going to go by this document. And this document doesn't have sufficient guidance about self-radicalization.
Thank you very much, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you for